Put your hiking shoes on, y'all. We're going to go south for this great segment. We are talking books and more. Jim Santos is coming on just a second to talk about his book that he went to South America to document and more, in his amazing story that we have chronicled at Yall.com. Y'all, the ultimate guide of the South, and you can go read the article in its entirety that we have up on Jim's book. But we're going to go to East Tennessee now and be joined by this travel writer who's going to talk about an uphill climb, and that is his book about hitting the trail, the Inca Trail in Peru, and his struggle as a survivor of someone who lost their fight against cancer. Jim, thank you for coming on the show that's all about the South.
Greetings, John. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, so how long you been at this travel thing?
Well, always kind of been interested in travel. My wife and I explored a lot of places, just kind of vacationing around. We've been to Italy, to France, Caribbean islands, Hawaii, other parts of the U.S. And kind of every place we went, we wondered what it would be like to live there. And we went much further south than we are right now. We went south of the equator and actually lived for almost 7 years in Ecuador. And it was during the time we were in Ecuador that I was able to retire and start doing travel writing. And that kind of all led up to us deciding to explore a little bit more of South America and eventually to tackle the Inca Trail.
Okay. What is the connection, if you don't mind, with East Tennessee, because that's where you find yourself now?
Well, it's interesting. I did some geology tracing. It turns out my family actually came from this area too, which I was completely unaware of. But basically, we were attracted here by a mild climate and because there's no state income tax. They don't tax retirement income here. At the time that we were planning all this, we thought that we were going to be switching to what's called a roving retirement lifestyle, where you spend 2 to 3 months living in a country and then switch to another country. Now, between us, we have 9 grandchildren. So naturally, we also need to spend some time in the U.S. So picking a place that had a mild climate where you could close up the house and have it, be safe and not worry about coming home to 9 feet of snow on it. So that was a reason that East Tennessee really appealed to us. And actually, the more we looked into it, the more we fell in love with the Knoxville area.
I see. And you mentioned your wife. What was her name?
My wife is Rita.
Rita. Okay.
Yeah.
And she had a battle with cancer, and that's what helped lead you, I guess you could say, sadly. I'm glad that the book came about, but your survivor guilt was part of the reason you wrote An Uphill Climb.
Actually, that was my first wife.
Oh, was it? Okay.
That had cancer, Carolyn. We were married for just a few weeks short of 25 years when she lost her battle to cancer. As I write in the book, I was I thought I'd be running out the clock, alone. Much to my surprise, I met Rita then, who had also lost a spouse to cancer. So we had some things in common almost right from the start. So I've been incredibly lucky to have been blessed with 2 wonderful, intelligent women in my lifetime.
That's always important.
Yeah.
Good read there. When did your first wife pass away? What year was it?
That was December of 2008.
Okay. And you were down in South America with her?
No, we were living in the eastern panhandle of West Virginia.
Ah, okay.
At the time, I didn't move overseas. It was Rita and I who decided to move overseas.
Ah, okay.
And actually, that's kind of part of the whole survival guilt thing here. And this is a topic I think even more people can relate to now. We're looking today at close to 212,000 deaths to COVID. And what you often don't think about are the people who were left behind can sometimes feel very guilty that their loved ones were taken and not them. And, I had at least 3 years knowing that my wife was going to be struggling and I could be there with her to help her and support her for those 3 years. And I can only imagine what people are going through now when they're isolated from their loved ones. In many cases, they're watching them die through a pane of glass, can't even go to be with them then. So I wrote this book really to reach out to people who may have gone through the same things I did and try to deal with this guilt of why is this good person gone and I'm left here. And in my case, part of the guilt was finding someone so fast. Like I say, I really thought I'd be alone, but 6 months after my wife passed, I was very much involved with Rita. And in many ways, my life is better now, more challenging, healthier. And perversely, that just kind of adds to the guilt. You start to feel like, what right do I have to be happy?
Jim, I want to ask you, we're talking with the author of An Uphill Climb, Jim Santos. You have Rita, your wife now, but you had the
Yes.
first wife of 25 years. So how do you
Right.
balance not necessarily trying to upset her when things come up that you enjoyed in your first marriage and someone who lost their struggle with cancer? How do you kind of balance that delicate balance between first and second wife?
Well, I'm helped in that because Rita did lose her first husband to cancer as well.
I didn't know that.
So we shared a lot of experiences there. Also, it's probably a benefit that I had not met Rita until after my wife passed. So there was no overlap there. It wasn't like there was any friends that we had in common or any activities that we had shared or anything like that. So for us, there were two very distinct parts of our lives. We also ended up selling the homes that we had at the time and purchasing something new so that we had something that we were building together. So there weren't a lot of memories around. As you know, my wife and I are very open with each other. She still talks about her husband. I still talk about my wife from time to time, but it's more of a sharing that brings us closer. There's not really any conflict there. I think as long as couples face these things openly and try to deal with it, they're going to have a much better chance of success than trying to just keep it inside and never talk about it at all.
We're glad that you're talking about it here today.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of the reason you're talking about it is it's because of the book An Uphill Climb. Of course, this is
Right.
a book where you go to the Inca Trail, and that's in Peru. And
Right.
all of this is part of your, as you put, survivor's guilt of surviving your first wife's death. And at what point did you know you would turn that unfortunate instance into a book, and how that came about while hiking the trail?
Well, to give you a little background, after my wife died, actually while she was dying, I started putting on a lot of weight, dealing with depression, just going through that experience. I'm sure people who have seen loved ones slowly die of cancer understand what I'm talking about here. I had put on a lot of weight, and at the time that she did pass, I weighed about 319 pounds at the time. So I was morbidly obese at that time. So I was even more shocked that I managed to meet someone as beautiful and wonderful as Rita and start a second life again. When we first moved to Ecuador, we started eating much healthier food. We had fresh seafood. We lived on the coast in a resort town called Salinas. But the fruits and vegetables there are raised without any kind of additives or hormones. We're getting all this fresh food all the time. We're out walking all the time because the weather was just great all the time. And I naturally started to lose some weight. As we explored other parts of Ecuador and some of the Andean villages there, we came to enjoy the beauty of hiking around that country too. So this idea just kind of naturally evolved that maybe we should set some sort of goal to do something a little more challenging, like tackle the Inca Trail. And it wasn't really until we got into that I started to realize what the attempt was actually meaning to me inside. Now, when my first wife died, of course, I was devastated. And for the first few months, to try to get some sort of handle on it and to try to handle the grief, I had started writing just a daily diary of what was going on in my life. And as I did that, I was also looking back what happened about 3 months ago this time during the final months of my wife's life. So I had already had all of this material that I had done for my own benefit there. As we trained for the trail, I started keeping a record also of how I was trying to lose weight and exercise and the steps we were taking to prepare ourselves. Because I was almost 60, my wife was over 60. And if you're not familiar with the Inca Trail, it's 26 miles of hiking you start at about 8,000 feet, you hit 14,000 feet twice. So it's not, for a normal healthy person, it's a challenge. So I definitely was going to have to lose a lot of weight to be able to get into shape to handle that. So for a long time, there were just these two separate items there. It wasn't really until we got back and I started thinking about it and what it all meant to me that it occurred to me that I could put those two together and tell a story that hopefully people could relate to and might help people dealing with some of the same kind of issues.
Now, to your credit, in addition to an uphill climb, you've got a lot of riding in your repertoire with travel writing and more. So this is not your first rodeo riding an uphill climb. So when we pick up this book, Survivor's Guild and the Inca Trail, we're going to learn a lot about the Inca Trail, just how beautiful this work of God's hand is.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, but the mountains of Ecuador. During our training period, we were very fortunate, first of all, to have the time to train for this. So, with both being retired, we were able to spend the time and effort that it takes to prepare for something like this. But also living in Ecuador, we could easily get to the Andes and take practice hikes at altitudes anywhere from 8,000 up to 13,000 feet. And in the course of doing that, we saw just some really beautiful places, met some wonderful people, the indigenous Quechan people of Ecuador and Peru. They're descendants from the old Incan Empire there. Really fascinating people and fascinating cultures. And we learned a lot about the country and the cuisines of the areas. And I tried to share that information also in preparing for the trail.
What is the length of this book, and how many photos are in an uphill climb?
I think there's about 108 photos, which is why in the print version, they're in black and white. If we went to color, you'd be talking about a $64 book. The electronic version, the pictures are all in color. And of course, you can expand those on your reading device. The book itself, I think, is about it's about 90,000 words. So it's about 320 some pages, I believe, in book format.
A great option. Again, we've got Christmas just around the corner and an uphill climb, a Survivor's Guild and the Inca Trail available. Jim, how can people find the book?
Easiest way is probably on Amazon.com. You can go there and either search my name, Jim Santos, or go to Amazon.com/authors/Jim Santos. I'm sorry, it's Amazon.com/author, no S, /Jim Santos. And that'll bring it up.
Great read. Again, lots of pictures. Should make for a good, if people are getting on airlines these days, certainly a good read on the airline, but definitely a good stocking stuffer. Hey,
or
I've got to ask you
about when you get on airlines. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You mentioned those great mountains of South America. How do those compare now that you've got all this hiking behind you and you now live in East Tennessee? How's East Tennessee and Western North Carolina shaping up from a hiking perspective?
Well, that was another reason that we were attracted to the Nashville area. We're only about an hour from the Great Smoky Mountains Park here, which is the most visited park in the country. And we had planned on doing all kinds of hiking in the park. In fact, back in February, we were in the early stages of planning to do an Appalachian Trail hike. And then, of course, COVID hit.
The whole thing?
Yep. Yeah, we were kind of back and forth. Do we want to do the whole thing? Do we want to do half this year and half next year? But again, you got to have goals. But we have enjoyed exploring the Smoky Mountains. And it's just completely different. The mountains here obviously are not as high as they are in the Andes. Even with the higher mountains in Ecuador, they tend to be very lush. It's really amazing to see people growing crops at 12,000 feet on a 45-degree slope. Makes you wonder how they plant them and harvest them. During our trip in Peru, a lot of time in the mountains there, those mountains tend to be a little grayer and a little rockier than in Ecuador. And we've actually made it as far south as Uruguay. In Uruguay, you're going to find just gently rolling hills. I think their highest hill is about 2,000 feet. But one of the things that we've learned is that there's a lot of beauty everywhere. And it's amazing how much you miss out on if you don't manage to get outside of your comfort zone and do a little bit of travel. But we've been very pleased with Eastern Tennessee here and our limited exploration so far of the Great Smoky Mountains.
Well, if you can, again, go to South America and hike up those gigantic mountains there, we know you and your wife can easily handle the Appalachian Trail. Jim Santos, thank you for coming on the Y'all Show and telling us all about an uphill climb. And we look forward to following this book's success and getting you back here on the Y'all Show again real soon. Thank you for your time today.
Okay, thank you again, John.
All right, and that was our book interview of the week here on the show that covers the South. More of Y'all is coming up.